The Galactic Empire's war chamber pulsed with shifting holograms of conquered systems, each one marked with imperial colors as if the galaxy itself had been painted in their arrogance. Senior officials moved with the confidence of a species that believed it had finally crushed its most persistent nuisance. Reports streamed in declaring human resistance broken, colonies abandoned, and defensive satellites shattered. Victory chants were already being rehearsed for the Emperor's forthcoming address. Yet in the middle of their celebration, the primary command lattice flickered. Static bled into the edges of the projection sphere, shrinking their triumphant glow into a dim haze. Technicians scrambled to stabilize the feed, but the interference swallowed their instruments one by one until the entire room fell silent. A darkened silhouette appeared where the Imperial crest had hovered moments before. No features, no uniform, no rank markings, only a faceless human figure standing with unmistakable stillness. Its presence alone quieted the room, not because of authority but because of the complete disregard for the Empire's sense of control. The High Senate waited for threats, demands, or pleas for mercy. Instead, the human spoke with a voice so calm it felt engineered to slice through arrogance. It stated that the Empire had crossed the final line, that humanity had deliberately withdrawn from the front to prepare, and that the next phase of this conflict would not resemble anything the Empire had faced before. The message was not delivered with fury or desperation. It carried the weight of certainty, as though the speaker already knew the outcome. The transmission continued, warning that Imperial fleets stationed near former human space had minutes to retreat if they wanted to survive the first wave. The Senate erupted into laughter, claiming the message was an empty bluff from a defeated civilization clinging to pride. Admirals exchanged smug glances, convinced the broadcast was a desperate attempt to intimidate them after suffering catastrophic losses. They dismissed it as a final act of defiance from a dying species. Yet as the humans spoke, several members of the Empire's intelligence division exchanged uneasy looks. The interference's signal origin couldn't be traced. It wasn't coming from a ship, a satellite, or any known relay. It existed everywhere at once, threaded through the Imperial network as if it had always been part of their infrastructure. The humans' final words cut through the rising mockery. "Run for your lives. This is the last warning your Empire will ever receive." The figure vanished, leaving behind a moment of weightless silence before the room erupted in irritated orders. The Emperor demanded an explanation, furious that a primitive species had breached the heart of their secure network. Analysts tore into every strand of the broadcast, yet each fragment misdirected, looping back into Imperial servers, bypassing encryption protocols as though the system had willingly opened itself. A few veteran strategists, long acquainted with humanity's unpredictable nature, urged caution. They reminded the Senate of earlier reports describing human prototypes capable of bending gravity fields, folding communications, and weapons systems that behaved in ways no Imperial scientist could replicate. Their warnings were dismissed as cowardice. The Empire viewed humans as stubborn but technologically inferior, incapable of orchestrating anything beyond guerrilla skirmishes. Their arrogance had calcified into doctrine. They could not imagine humans evolving under pressure, learning faster than any species the Empire had ever subjugated. Still, tension spread quietly through the war chamber. Background scanners detected fluctuations that did not match known technology, microspatial distortions flickering around Imperial outposts. Communications officers reported ghost signals passing through restricted channels, echoing the exact cadence of the human warning, yet coming from sectors the Empire had already razed. Even the automated defense grid behaved erratically, cycling through unknown diagnostic modes as if responding to invisible commands. The Empire insisted it remained in control, but uneasy whispers moved among lower-ranking officers who had witnessed human tenacity firsthand. They knew humanity rarely spoke without intent. A warning this direct meant something massive had shifted in the void beyond their sensors. Every empire that underestimated humans throughout galactic history had regretted it, yet the Senate brushed aside centuries of recorded examples. They assumed dominance, failing to notice the smallest details that hinted at imminent catastrophe. The last light in the chamber stabilized, restoring the Imperial crest. Officials resumed their planning with forced confidence. But deep beneath the facade of superiority, the message lingered. Somewhere in uncharted darkness, humanity listened and waited. They had issued their final warning, and no amount of denial would change what approached. Imperial analysts worked through the night, dissecting every millisecond of the human broadcast. What began as a routine security review twisted into a web of contradictions that none of their systems could resolve. The signal behaved like a living organism, splitting, merging, duplicating, and slipping through encrypted channels with precision far beyond anything the Empire possessed. Every attempt to isolate a point of origin looped their tools back onto themselves, as though the message had been woven directly into the architecture of Imperial communication arrays long before the war had escalated. The notion was impossible, yet the data refused to suggest anything else. Still, senior officials ordered the investigation sealed, unwilling to give the human warning more credibility than the Senate wanted to admit existed. Military strategists convened in private chambers to interpret the anomalies detected across peripheral star systems. Gravity sensors flagged microdistortions near abandoned human borders, subtle warps too controlled to be natural phenomena. Scouts stationed in those regions reported phantom readings, brief spikes in energy signatures that vanished the moment crews tried to lock onto them. These distortions aligned with the exact timing of the human message, but commanders dismissed the pattern as coincidental sensor drift. The Empire had spent centuries believing its technology was unmatched, acknowledging that humans could wield forces they barely understood threatened the very foundation of their doctrine. Fleet admirals began issuing cautious directives to reinforce border patrols, though they masked the decision as routine readiness in case the broadcast inspired an insurgent resurgence. Internal tension grew as conflicting reports emerged. Some scout ships claimed they intercepted whisper-like pulses encoded with fragmented human language. Others insisted they saw nothing, fueling debates about sensor malfunctions or mass hysteria. None of it aligned with the Empire's assumption that humanity was on the brink of extinction. If humans were truly defeated, why did their presence echo through systems the Empire had supposedly sterilized? Within the intelligence division, a small circle of veteran analysts dared to suggest the possibility that humans had retreated intentionally, using their losses as a strategic smokescreen. They pointed to past encounters where humans adapted under pressure with alarming speed, turning defeats into catalysts for breakthroughs. Their theories were dismissed as paranoia, yet their unease deepened with every unexplainable reading. They knew humans did not waste words. If they said the Empire had minutes to retreat, something larger than any recorded human fleet had to be approaching. Debates intensified as the Emperor demanded a public demonstration of strength to calm Imperial citizens who were beginning to hear whispers of the broadcast through leaked channels. In response, the Admiralty ordered a full-scale deployment of 3 battle formations toward the former human frontier, believing they would crush whatever remnants dared to challenge them. The mobilization was intended to intimidate any lingering resistance, but morale within the ranks wavered. Soldiers who had fought humans before recognized the quiet confidence embedded in the warning. Humanity never bluffed about survival. Technicians working on deep-range sensors noticed a recurring pattern hidden beneath background radiation from the outer sectors. It resembled a signature jump distortion, but it carried no heat trails, no warp residue, and no directional vector. The distortion was silent, like an object moving without interacting with surrounding space. Attempts to triangulate it failed, the data bent around the calculations as if the distortion itself refused to be measured. The readings grew more frequent as the Empire's fleets advanced, creating a growing dissonance commanders struggled to ignore. Tension rippled through the Senate as conflicting interpretations reached them. Some claimed the distortions indicated failing Imperial equipment, while others argued they were signs of an advancing threat. The Emperor silenced all dissent, insisting the Empire's dominance remained absolute. The official stance declared humanity incapable of mounting any serious response, reinforcing the belief that the broadcast was a psychological tactic rather than a strategic one. Despite the confident facade, the Empire began issuing emergency protocols to reinforce Central Command worlds. Civilian networks were scrubbed to remove rumors of approaching retaliation. Yet the sense of unease only grew stronger. Officers in remote outposts watched their instruments flicker without explanation. Patrol ships reported momentary system freezes, as if something unseen brushed past their hulls. Even the Empire's automated defense platforms shifted into diagnostic modes without command input. The Empire continued to prepare outwardly as if nothing were wrong, projecting authority while avoiding the deeper truth. Every pattern, every anomaly, every silent pulse pointed to the same conclusion: something was coming. Something humanity had built in the shadows. And despite all their pride, the Empire could feel it: pressure building in the void, gathering in the darkness, closing in with purpose. Humanity's retreat had never been a collapse. It was a calculated withdrawal executed with an efficiency the Empire had mistaken for desperation. Long before the first cities fell, human leadership recognized that conventional warfare against a numerically superior enemy was futile. They shifted focus from defending territory to accelerating research initiatives hidden beneath the ashes of abandoned colonies. Every defeat the Empire celebrated was a deliberate misdirection, buying humans the time they needed to forge something entirely new, something designed not to match the Empire, but to surpass every military doctrine ever written. In subterranean laboratories beneath the scorched remains of former Terran worlds, scientists worked without pause. They dissected the physics of collapse fields, experimented on gravitational shear layers, and learned to bend energy signatures until they slipped between measurable frequencies. What the Empire interpreted as silence was the sound of humanity refining technologies the galaxy had never imagined. Engineers discovered how to construct warships capable of navigating quantum filaments unseen by conventional sensors, using the natural turbulence of space as camouflage. Weapons specialists learned to generate destructive force without heat trails, recoil, or traceable emissions. These advances were not incremental improvements. They represented a fundamental shift in how war could be waged. Decades of conflict had galvanized humanity into a unified purpose. Politicians relinquished authority to scientific councils, militaries ceded control to strategic AI clusters, and entire populations mobilized to support the creation of Project Final Dawn. Every human, regardless of station, carried the weight of extinction on their shoulders. They responded not with despair, but with a determination that bordered on ferocity. While the Empire boasted about victories, human workers assembled fleets in deep space construction rings cloaked behind gravitational anomalies. The Empire's scanners swept past these locations countless times, registering nothing but empty void. The first completed vessel of the new era emerged silently from its construction shroud, an obsidian colossus with no glare, no reflection, and no emission signature. It was not built to intimidate but to execute. Its hull absorbed light, swallowed sound, and manipulated gravitational tension like a living organism. It could transition through full space corridors without creating the ripples Imperial sensors relied on. This ship, codenamed the Horizon Breaker, was only the beginning. Hundreds more followed, each refined to operate with precision that defied the Empire's understanding of material limits. Crew selection for these vessels was ruthless. Veterans who had survived early battles were chosen for their adaptability and discipline. They trained with systems that felt almost alive, responding to neural impulses and microgestures. Command interfaces adjusted to each operator's cognitive patterns, eliminating the lag the Empire depended on exploiting. Every officer understood the mission, not conquest, but prevention. Humanity refused to let the Empire's reign of dominance threaten them again. The objective was clear: neutralize the Empire's ability to wage war, decisively and permanently. As the fleets assembled, human leadership prepared a second message. Unlike the first, which was meant to warn, this one served as a declaration of capability. Engineers embedded it within quantum packets seeded across Imperial navigation channels, ready to activate the instant human fleets entered contested space. The message was simple but carried immense weight. It informed the Empire that humanity had completed preparations, that the balance of power had shifted, and that the Empire's actions had triggered consequences beyond recovery. When the Horizon Breaker initiated its first silent jump, space bent around the vessel with a whisper rather than a roar. It materialized at the edge of former Imperial siege lines, undetected even as sensors scanned directly through it. Human operatives observed Empire patrols moving with routine confidence, unaware that an entire human armada hovered just beyond the limit of their comprehension. The fleet's presence distorted the fabric of space slightly, an effect the Empire would later describe as the air tightening before a storm. Inside the warship command chambers, human officers monitored synchronized fleet formations preparing for the first coordinated strike. There was no gloating, no anger, only precise execution. Every soldier carried memories of lost worlds and fallen families, but they had learned to channel their pain into discipline. Their resolve forged the silent storm gathering beyond Imperial territory. Humanity had returned, not with vengeance, but with inevitability. They had crossed the threshold between survival and supremacy, and the galaxy was about to understand what humans could become when pushed to the edge. Imperial patrol fleets drifted along their designated routes with mechanical confidence, unaware that the space around them had begun to warp in patterns their sensors couldn't interpret. At first, the distortions were subtle, minor anomalies dismissed as calibration drift. But as the minutes passed, the fluctuations intensified, forming silent pockets where gravity thinned, light bent, and sound seemed to dampen inside sealed cockpits. Officers watched their instruments flash warnings that made no sense, insisting that something massive was approaching without leaving any trace of propulsion or heat. Commanders barked orders to perform full-spectrum scans, yet every sweep returned fragmented data, as if the void itself refused to be measured. The first unmistakable sign came when an entire support cruiser lost power for precisely 3 seconds, then reactivated with its systems reset as though it had never been launched. Logs recorded no breach, no impact, no external interference. The ship's crew, shaken and pale, reported that during the blackout they felt a pressure across their chests, like space had compressed around them. Admirals attempted to explain the event as a rare quantum surge, but the fear in their voices betrayed the growing realization. Something was moving near them, something their technology couldn't comprehend. Moments later, every Imperial ship within 5 sectors experienced a synchronized sensor collapse. Screens filled with static before rebooting into a blank slate. In that instant of blindness, the Horizon Breaker and its escort fleet arrived. They didn't burst into real space. They unfolded from it, emerging as if they had always been there, concealed behind the curtain of physics the Empire believed it understood. Human vessels hung in perfect formation, their matte black hulls absorbing starlight, their silhouettes bending the space around them in quiet, undeniable dominance. The Empire's fleets had no warning. They didn't even know where to aim. Admirals demanded visual confirmation, but even the optical feeds struggled to capture the Terran ships clearly. Edges blurred, shadows stretched where none should exist, and reflections refused to form. The Empire had spent centuries perfecting warship design, yet nothing in their vast arsenal resembled these silent juggernauts. Panic rippled through command decks as weapons officers attempted to lock targets, only to find their targeting arrays overruled by error codes stating that the objects did not exist within measurable parameters. Human vessels moved with unsettling precision. Without firing a lethal shot, they unleashed waves of controlled disruption pulses that shut down weapon systems, immobilized engines, and stripped shielding without damaging infrastructure. Imperial cruisers floated helplessly, their crews shouting reports of controls freezing at the exact moment they tried to retaliate. Some officers believed they were under psychic attack, others assumed they were trapped in a simulated environment. The truth was simpler and far more terrifying. Humans had advanced beyond anything the Empire's doctrines accounted for. A new broadcast flooded every Imperial channel simultaneously, overriding command authority. This time there was no silhouette. The screen displayed nothing but a calm blue field, and a human voice spoke with the clarity of absolute certainty. It informed the Empire that their fleets had been neutralized without casualties, that every ship still had the opportunity to withdraw, and that humanity would not repeat the warning a third time. The voice carried no anger, only a deliberate authority that made the threat feel like a promise already fulfilled. Imperial commanders attempted to order retreat, but many ships were dead in space, motionless and powerless to respond. Those able to move scrambled to escape the containment field generated by the human fleet, only to find the space around them thickening like invisible pressure pushing back. The Empire's most advanced dreadnought, a vessel meant to dwarf any known threat, attempted to open a warp corridor and break the encirclement. Its engines activated, but the corridor collapsed instantly, tearing the ship's fabricators offline and leaving it drifting without propulsion. The crew realized with horror that humans had mastered the manipulation of warp layers so precisely they could deny passage at will. Fears spread like infection. Officers who once mocked human unpredictability now whispered that the Empire had awakened a force capable of rewriting the rules of combat. Meanwhile, humans advanced without hesitation, disabling entire formations with surgical efficiency. Not a single human ship took damage. Not a single human officer raised their voice. The silent storm moved with purpose, sweeping through Imperial lines like an inevitable tide. By the time the Empire understood the scale of the disaster, it was too late. They weren't facing remnants of a broken species. They were standing before a civilization that had rebuilt itself in the shadows and returned with power that defied every assumption the Empire had ever held. And in that moment, the final truth became undeniable. Humanity hadn't issued a warning out of desperation, only out of courtesy. Imperial space descended into chaos as the realization spread that humanity's arrival was not an attack but a controlled dismantling of an empire's entire military backbone. Civilian networks, once censored to maintain morale, overflowed with terrified broadcasts as word leaked from surviving officers. Every message carried the same trembling truth: human warships were unstoppable, silent, and impossibly precise. Worlds that once celebrated Imperial dominance now erupted into frantic evacuations. Families fled to transport hubs, political officials scrambled to secure safe passage, and planetary defense ministries broadcast contradictory orders. The phrase, "The humans are coming," echoed across the Empire like a prophecy fulfilled. As human fleets advanced, they bypassed civilian sectors entirely. Their focus remained fixed on military infrastructure, shipyards, command relays, and weapon platforms. Each target was neutralized without loss of life. Platforms shut down as if they had decided to surrender on their own. Missiles dissolved into harmless particles mid-flight. Shield generators faded into dark silence. The Empire's greatest pride, its endless military machine, crumbled without a single Terran vessel firing a destructive beam. That restraint, more than any act of violence, struck the deepest fear. Every species the Empire had conquered learned the same unsettling truth: humans didn't need to destroy to dominate. They simply erased the civilization's capacity to resist. Amid the collapse, desperate communiques flooded the Emperor's throne world. Sector governors reported entire fleets immobilized. Admirals pleaded for reinforcements that no longer existed. Scientists begged for time to analyze human technology that slipped through every known model. Civilians posted messages begging forgiveness, hoping humanity might spare them from consequences born of imperial arrogance. Even long-loyal species within the Empire saw the writing on the wall and began withdrawing support, eager to avoid being caught in humanity's path. In the Imperial Palace, the Emperor finally confronted the magnitude of the crisis. Advisors urged him to open negotiations. Others argued for surrender. A few insisted humanity must be bluffing, though even they struggled to maintain the facade. The Emperor hesitated until the palace lights dimmed. Every screen, projection, and data slate flickered, overridden by a silent, cold blue display. Humanity's final message arrived directly into the heart of imperial power. A human voice, unhurried and steady, addressed the Emperor by name. It stated that the Empire's conquests had forced humanity into a war they never sought but would now finish definitively. The message emphasized that humanity refused to become conquerors. Their goal was to ensure the Empire would never again raise a weapon against them, or anyone else. The voice explained that all Imperial military capabilities had been neutralized, that further resistance was irrelevant, and that civilians would remain untouched as long as the Empire complied. Then the words came that shattered the final veneer of Imperial pride. "We warned you. We do not conquer. We end threats." The Emperor, realizing defiance would lead to irreversible annihilation, issued the order no ruler before him had ever dared to give. Across the entire galactic empire, systems received a prioritized directive: unconditional surrender to humanity. Fleets powered down. Fortresses opened their gates. Worlds once feared for their brutality sent apologies into the void, pleading for leniency from a species they had once deemed weak. Human forces, upon receiving confirmation of surrender, ceased all advancement instantly. Their fleets hovered silently at the edge of imperial capitals, maintaining formation without firing a shot. The galaxy watched in stunned disbelief as the greatest military power in known history fell without a single battle in the traditional sense. Humanity had demonstrated a level of discipline and restraint unmatched by any empire before them. In the aftermath, the Galactic Council convened an emergency assembly. Representatives from dozens of species voted unanimously to declare humanity a protected, sovereign superpower, one that no civilization would challenge again. They acknowledged that humans held the capability to rewrite galactic warfare, yet chose to step back once the threat was over. That choice alone cemented their new position. When human fleets finally withdrew, they left behind no occupation zones, no demands, and no monuments. They departed as silently as they had arrived, leaving the Empire to rebuild in the shadow of its greatest mistake. The final message remained etched in the minds of billions across the galaxy, a reminder of a warning too late understood: run, if humanity ever says run, because they never speak without certainty.